G'day, welcome to video 4. I'm Nick Dingle. We're going to go through what variables are and why they're so gosh darn important. How to use them, how to manipulate them, those kind of things. So in this video, let's jump straight into what the hell is a variable? So a variable is what we use in programming world to store one bit of data at a time. So think of it as a container. I always like to use this analogy of a cardboard box that you're going to use to move houses. But it's a really tiny little cardboard box. This one might look gigantic. The variables we're talking about are really small. Okay? The idea is you can store some data or a value inside this container and it can change. And that's why we call them variables. It does come from algebra, where we usually put on the board like x equals 10 and x is the variable. That's where it all comes from. Now, if you've ever done any programming in any other language before, Python's a bit of a strange one. You just start using your variables and Python will automatically just create them and set them all up for you. But we'll talk about the caveats really soon. So how do you make a variable? Well, you call it declaring a variable when it comes to the world of programming. So when you want to make a variable, you simply just declare it. You just start using it. And you do that by just simply giving it a name and equaling a value. Once you've done that, Python creates it, sets up the value, and sets a lot of background stuff that you don't have to worry about, which is beautiful. So in this example here, I've created 4 different variables named name, year, height, and working. And each one has got what's called a different data type, and I'll go into that really soon. But you can see I've put name equals Dingo Teach, year is 2023, height is that, and working equals true. Okay, and in every single case, I've made a variable, it stores a single value, and now I can do all sorts of things with those values. I can do some maths, I can put them on the screen, I can do whatever I want, really. And if we jump to the next slide, I want to quickly talk about the different components that make up a variable. So coming back to that cardboard box analogy, and we'll jump into Python in a second to start making some variables. But there are 3 bits that make up a variable. There is its name, also known as identifier. There is its data type, which are essentially the rules for your variable, and the value you are storing. So if you think about the cardboard box that you're going to use to move a house, typically, when you put something inside the box, you put a name on the front so you can identify what is in the box. So for us, I put the word name so I know that, the only thing that goes inside this box are names. And then I put Dingo Teach inside the box, close it up, and I've now got a box with name on the front storing Dingo Teach. And then when I look inside the box next time, there's Dingo Teach inside the box. Okay. Now, the only annoying thing is there's only room for 1 name inside this box. Makes it a bit of a useless box, but that's important. Let's jump over to Visual Studio Code. Let's start making some variables. So let's start off by making a new file. I'm going to call this variables.py and start coding up some Storm. Now, can I recommend don't ever delete any file you make, even if it's just like a little throwaway thing. Save it with a bit of a decent name and use it as a reference in the future. So for this one, I'm simply going to go name equals Dingo Teach in those quotes to make it a string. Then I go year equals 2023. There's another variable, height equals 168.1, and working equals false. Capital F and capital T for true, by the way, when you want to do that. And you can keep going. So you could go name2 equals Dingle or whatever reason like that, year 2 and all those kind of things. You can make as many variables as you want until your computer runs out of RAM. Okay, which would be pretty impressive if you've managed to do that just by writing individual lines of code. Now, don't forget to hit Control S to save. It's another thing I didn't mention in the last video, but I always just hit Control S just to make sure. And there is also an auto save option, which is by default ticked. All right, so this is making us 4 variables, storing 4 values. Now, what's the point? Okay, well, before we get to that, let's talk about naming rules. I've created 4 variables with 4 different identifiers, and there are rules to how you can name your variables. The first, most important rule is you can only use letters, numbers, and underscores when it comes to making your variables. Okay, if you try to use special characters or spaces or diamonds or those kind of things, well, it's just going to break. It's just going to die. It will not work. It will just complain to you. It also means you can't use multiple words for your variable names. If you want to use multiple words, let's say, for example, just as a bad example, you want to call something first name equals Nick, like that, you can see it's having a bit of a heart attack because it doesn't know what you want to do. Now, there are different ways that you can use multiple words in your variable name. You can simply put an underscore if you'd like. Some people like the underscores. I personally don't. I personally like what's called camel capitalization, which is where the first word is lowercase, but the rest of them, each word after that gets a capital letter. Okay, and that's my preference personally. And there are other ones, but that's the one that I tend to stick to. Okay. Other rules include you cannot start with a number. So if you really want to store, let's say, how many pies you've eaten today or how many dozens of pies, you can't say call a variable 12 pies. Okay, you can call it pies 12. That's perfectly fine, but it cannot start with a number. Okay, it can start with an underscore or a letter. Now, names are case sensitive. If I make a variable called name and I make another one called name, they are completely different variables. Python doesn't care that they are only one tiny thing different. To Python, those are completely different variables and it will store different things and they will act differently. Okay, so another important thing. And the last thing is you cannot use keywords such as print. Okay, Python doesn't particularly like that because now I'm going to go try and print my variable and now Python has no idea what I'm trying to do. So don't use any keywords. So on that note, got the naming rules. Let's look at data types. Now, these are essentially the rules of what your variable can do and what it can store. So a data type essentially is like, how do I put this? Essentially like the bubble that it lives within. And there are 4 primitive or basic data types. So primitive just means really simple. And we've already seen them, okay? The first one being integer, okay? Not integer, integer. An integer is just simply a positive or negative whole number. So that is like a 2, or in this case, year equals 2023. That is an integer. Even -5 would be an integer in this case. Quite often that is shortened down to int, but that's the first data type that you need to know of. The second data type I've got here is a Boolean, named after the mathematician that invented Boolean mathematics. But essentially a Boolean is a true or false. Think of it like a light switch. It's either turned on or it's turned off. There is no in between. There is no middle. There is nothing else it can be. It is just true or false. That's it. Okay, and I did that example here with working equals true, or in my case, false before. Now, float is short for floating point number. They are large, they are fractional, and they are positive and negative numbers. So in this case, when I created height equals 1.68.1, because it had that fractional bit on it, it creates a float. And the last example is string. Just like I talked about in the previous video, a string is anything in quotes, and it typically is letters, numbers, words, sentences, paragraphs, books, anything you want, anything that can be made up of letters and characters is a string. And that includes emojis, it includes Unicode characters, it includes Cyrillic characters, all those kind of crazy stuff. Essentially, it is just anything that appears between single or double quotes. Okay, and it can include numbers, but it doesn't treat them like numbers. It treats them like letters. And again, my example for a string was name equals dingo teach. That was a string because I put quotes around it. Okay, if I put quotes around any of the other ones, it would have made them strings as well. So don't put quotes around integers, floats, or booleans because they need to have nothing around them in order for Python to know it's not a string, it's something else. Okay, so that is data types. Now, you've made these variables. You've made 4 of them. What the hell do you do with them? Well, the simplest thing you can do, well, let's just print them to the screen because that's what we know how to do. So the first thing is let's just print our name to the screen. Well, you simply do the print command. You open up your brackets just like in the last video and you type in the identifier for the variable. So name, like so, hit play, and you'll notice all it does is puts the word Dingo Teach, which is the value in our little cardboard box. It gets pulled out of the cardboard box and thrown onto the screen. Okay, and you can do the same thing for all the other variables. Whoop, help if I type that correctly. So year can be done the same. It prints the value of name and the value of year. Okay, just like so. Now, what if you wanted to mix them together? What if you wanted to print a message and the value at the same time, like hello, Nick, or something like that? So in that case, what you want to do is called an F formatted string. Okay. Now that sounds really complicated, but it's actually incredibly simple. You simply put the letter F before your string, an F formatted string. When you do this, it tells Python, hey mate, my string may include a variable. And if it does, don't print the word, print the value. And I'll show you what I mean if you don't use an F string very soon. So let's go hello, and then squiggly brackets or curly braces, first name, just like so. So it's going to print the word hello and then the value of first name. So hello, Nick. Simple as that. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now, if I didn't include that F string at the front and I press play now, you can see it doesn't know that I'm trying to print a variable. It just says, oh, okay, I'm just going to print everything in your message. Okay, so the F string allows you to do multiple things. It is the year. Okay, so you can see I can use curly braces as many times as I want, like so. Okay, so I've given you 3 examples here, and these are going to be the outputs of year. We'll just print the value of year. My name is, just like we did as the second example, and I am working. True. Simple as that. Okay. Now, once you've made a variable, printing it isn't the only thing you can do. Manipulating it is another thing. Now, I'm going to talk about arithmetic operations in the next video, but for right now, just let's look at this example. I've got a equals 10, so it's going to make an integer called a and set its value to 10. I've said b equals 15. C is equal to 20 plus b. So see if you can figure out what that is. And then a equals c. And then it's printing a, b, c, a. Okay, what do you think it will print to the screen? Okay, it's important to note only the last or the most recent value assigned using the assignment operator is kept. So with that in mind, predict what the output is, go and type it in and have a go yourself. Okay, I'm not even going to write this in and press play. You guys are going to do that. But for a bit of a challenge, I would like you to have a go at the W3 Schools exercise. Now, this is called the Variables Exercise 1. Okay, if you just go and Google W3 Schools Python Variables Exercise, it'll throw you into this one. And it's going to give you a bunch. So create a variable called car name and assign the value Volvo to it. You submit your answer and have a look if you're right or wrong. Jump to the next one, create a variable called X, assign it the value 15. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks very much for watching, guys and gals. In the next video, we are going to explore operators, and that's going to make our variables a lot more interesting. So I'll see you in that one.